Hi everyone and welcome to an episode of the Rangers Ramble, and today we're joined by Justin Egan. Is that your surname, Justin? Is that me pronouncing it properly? Egan, is it
Oh,
Egan?
Egan, yep.
Egan. We're joined by Justin Egan from over the pond, as they say, in New York. And we're on today to talk about a certain James Sands. So Justin, just tell us a wee bit about yourself first of all, and then we'll go on to James and we can talk about James, or do you call him Jimmy? Is it Jimmy Sands or is it James Sands?
So he actually turns out to have quite a few nicknames. Jimmy was a very popular nickname for our previous coach, Dome Turan. So Jimmy, I think would be fun.
Right, that's fine. We'll call him Jimmy. So let us know a wee bit about yourself, Justin. Are you a big New York City Football Club fanatic, or are you a full American sports fanatic like myself?
Yeah, so I write for NYCFC Tactics and Analytics newsletter, The Outfield. I've been a season ticket holder really since the first year in 2015 for NYCFC. I also coach high school basketball in New York City. And yeah, so, it's a great year for James Sands to say.
So I've been reading a wee bit about James Sands since he's been linked with ourselves, Glasgow Rangers. I've been looking at his profile and I can see he came through the academy with his brother. Is that correct? Will
Yeah,
Sands?
so he has a twin brother,
Yeah.
Will, who is playing for Georgetown University in NCAA soccer. They both came out through the academy, and so it's actually like a really interesting and actually like Rangers linked history
Yep.
is when City Football Group announced the NYCFC project. Who did they bring in to start the project? Right, is Claudio Reyna, who obviously U.S. men's national team legend, former Rangers player,
Yeah,
and so previously, before taking that position with City Football Group, he had been the director of a youth club, New York City Soccer Club, where actually both Sands brothers actually came. So, the reason why James Sands actually turned out in the NYCFC Academy is actually because of Claudio Reyna.
That's really good to know that. I mean, Claudio Reyna, as you probably know yourself, he was a fantastic footballer, not just for Rangers, but for the USA and other clubs he was with. So I also read that James is, or Jimmy as I call him, Jimmy, he was the first ever homegrown player for New York City. Is that correct?
Yeah, so he was the first player to sign a contract to play in MLS for the academy team. He's played for, Patrick Vieira, Dome Turan, who was Pep Guardiola's right-hand man for so long at Man City, and currently Ronnie Dyla, who also has, a Scottish football connection as
Yeah,
the
he
former
has,
coach of Celtic.
yeah.
Not that we'll mention that here.
No, we'll not mention Celtic here, Justin. So we're going to James himself now. He's played 65 games in total for New York. Is that correct? I see he's not scored any goals. Is that because he's more a defensive player? Is he a midfielder? What would you say his best position is, and what would you say his attributes are?
So I think like the best way to describe James is he is positionally flexible. We've had quite a few coaching turnovers in NYCFC the last couple of years. And with that, a lot of tweaks to our systems. He's played as a midfielder in a 3-4-3. He's played as all three center backs in
Right.
a three in a back position. He's played as the lone defensive midfielder in a 4-3-3. He's also played in a 4-2-3-1. Usually better paired with a more forward player in the double pivot. And even at the end of the year last year, in actually like a move that kind of saved our season, he actually played right back. And so he is a super smart, super reliable defender. I would probably say his best position is, defensive midfielder in a single pivot 4-3-3, or if he's paired in a 4-2-3-1 with, a more forward player. But, he's super reliable. He's very safe in possession. I guess like his weaknesses are he's not necessarily like the fastest guy, but he makes up with his smarts. He is usually, his positioning is fantastic.
Right.
And, he usually doesn't have to like use pace because he's usually in position to cut off a counter. I think he could also be really good as an outside back in a 3-in-the-back scenario, or like as like, I don't know, some systems use like the center back in a 3-in-the-back situation as like a hybrid defensive midfielder center back. So like any of those probably he'll do really well in, but especially looking forward, I think the highest ceiling for him is as defensive midfielder. And hopefully in the future, that's where we also see him hopefully backing up Tyler Adams eventually as the 6th for the U.S. men's national team.
I was going to say that he's had 7 caps for the US team, which is quite a good amount for somebody who's not long been a professional football player. So, I mean, the USA team is quite strong at the moment. I know it's in the past it's not been as strong, but it's getting obviously better every year. And James has been involved recently, so obviously there's a good future for him with the national team, because the national team has got a lot of players who play in Europe as well as playing at home, haven't they? So, do you see James being a mainstay for the national team over the coming years? If his career develops the way he wants it to go.
So I think like right now he is a little bit on the outside looking in.
Right.
I think eventually, depending on how like if he progresses, like I think a lot of NYCFC fans think he's going to progress. I think his ceiling is maybe as I would like to see him as like the backup 6 for Tyler Adams on the men's team. There doesn't seem to be a whole heck of a lot of like really great depth options at that position for the men. He got to play in the Gold Cup this year, which I don't know how in-depth on CONCACAF soccer you're getting into, but it was an interesting year for the CONCACAF competitions because we had the Gold Cup, our continental competition, but also we had our own, CONCACAF Nations League as well. So, the strategy was to play like the A team for the CONCACAF Nations League, and then, use the Gold Cup, which unfortunately in CONCACAF is every 2 years instead of every 4 years, like the Euro Cup, to use the Gold Cup as, more of a take some flyers on some people. I think James played really well in some of the games, especially the ones where, the US was able to like take possession and, the more calmer games, but the some of the games that were more up and down, he kind of struggled with the U.S. system.
Obviously, he's still young. He's only 21, so he's still he's got a lot of development to do. And you said the weaknesses. One of his weaknesses is maybe he's not as quick, as in like when he's controlling the ball manipulation, ball distribution. How does that compare with James? Is he good at distribution of the ball? As in, can he pass a ball more than 5 yards? Can he control the ball with both feet? Is he very, very one-footed?
So, one of the things about James is that he kind of has played every defensive position for NYCFC except for left back. And, so New York City plays a very like Man City light, recycle possession, high pressing type of system. And, since he's debuted, he's always been really safe with the ball. New York City has played out of the back with nearly all of their coaches. And, Dome Tehran once told me that, I tell everybody, even the veterans, like if you're under pressure, get the ball to James and he'll be able to make the right play. What he's not necessarily as good as is with the progressive passing, the line breaking passing, getting the ball forward. But it is one thing that in the last year he actually made really big strides in. Developing, like he used to be like one of the worst progressive passers in MLS from the midfield position. And he actually, depending on what analytic you're looking at, turned into like maybe like top 10 type of midfield passer. So we'll see. But offense is not necessarily his forte.
Yeah, so when New York, I've only seen a couple of highlights in New York City games, but when they're playing, is James the one that usually, if they're attacking, is James the one that usually stays deeper? Because
he usually is always one of the ones deeper, and the New York City plays like in that like aggressive high pressing style, and the fact that they can get really aggressive, especially on the counter press, because we have two really fantastic center backs in Maxime Chanot and Alexander Collins, but also like the fact that you have Sands back there, and usually when the ball's in the offensive third, they almost form, regardless of what formation we're in, form like a back three. And New York City, despite we play one of the highest lines in MLS, but we still haven't given up a lot of goals. And, James Sands is a big reason for that. And usually even on set pieces, he's not been deployed in the box, but as one of, the guy in the back.
Right, so he went at corner kicks and free kicks. He's always outside the box in case the opposition break.
No, at half field.
Right, half field, right.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know a lot about Scottish football or European football in general. Do you feel James is a good fit for that type of football?
So I am very high on James Sands. I think a lot of New York City fans have been, wondering like, why hasn't he gotten a shot in Europe yet? And he was getting some looks in the Bundesliga.
Yeah, I see that, yeah.
But, I think that I'm a big fan of this move, especially since, he is going to, one of the top two clubs, right, in Scottish football. I think I would be feeling, at least like for his development, a little worse, if it was, not Rangers or Celtic.
Yeah, you know yourself. You probably know that we've had players like Claudio Reyna, players like Morris Edu, DeMarcus Beasley, Carlos Bocanegra. So there's been a few American players has been at the club who were very good players for the national team as well, and they've had good careers elsewhere. So hopefully, if James does come, his path can go the same way, because I feel if Rangers, if you do get the signing over the line, and he progresses the way yourself has said, but other people I've read about have said, do you feel that Rangers could bring him in for a couple of seasons and then he's got the ability and the potential to go to play in England, to play in Germany, to play in Spain, these type of leagues?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is really important for New York City. You said before, right? He's our first homegrown player. And, you know, New York City, like as a selling point for our academy, like really needs him to do well. And I know that, I'm not really certain what the financials are actually, looking like, but the impression that I got is that this move is being done because this is the place that Sands can succeed the most at. Because, they really need, those other kids in the academy to see, like, listen, sign for us, look what James Sands did. We have a couple other kids like Giovanni Reyna and Joe Scally that didn't necessarily get all the playing time with the first team with NYCFC before making their moves to Europe. So, I think like the hope is that, he develops and he becomes, like that great story of, look what NYCFC produced. And, I hope to see him, in one of the top 5 leagues. Maybe not soon, but, that's definitely like his path and trajectory. And, you also have a lot of other young players at New York City, like Jack Harrison at Leeds, Angel Herrera as well, that, have been able to make that transition from MLS to, one of the bigger leagues.
Now, you've talked about James being homegrown and being a fan of New York sports myself. I know a lot of New York fans of certain teams like homegrown players in their team. It's one of the things you like to see somebody from your own area or from your own place where you come from succeeding. So, has James got a big, high expectation from New York City fans just because they feel he's one of their own?
Yeah, definitely. But there's also like financial reasons. Like MLS is a salary capped league, so the way that the financials work out and everything, like you need to be able to produce homegrown talent in order to really have like that cutting edge in advantage, like in the salary cap game.
Right.
But yeah, definitely I think there's a lot of high expectations for James. I know that a lot of City fans are not too happy with the loan because he's been such an important player for us. But this is kind of like, this is how MLS is developing. You need to be able to sell players, and you need to be able to replace them.
Now, obviously, MLS has been about for a long time now. When it first came about, a lot of people, probably still to this day, a lot of people don't rate it as a very big league or as a good league. But I know myself, from 20 years ago till today, the league has it's been a massive turnaround, and it's a lot better than a lot of people give it credit for. Have you seen that yourself? Has the league improved a lot over the last 10 years even, compared to what it used to be like? Because it used to be a place where maybe professionals from England or abroad went to maybe retire, but now they're getting a lot more younger players in the league, and they're selling players for more money, and these players are going to places like Germany, like England, and they're progressing themselves, but they're proving to be very good, talented football players.
Yeah, and I think like New York City is a great case study on that. Like in 2015, probably a lot of European fans knew about New York City, right? Because, we had Villa and Lampard and Pirlo. But, the reality is, like, outside of Villa, those guys did not really mesh well together. New York City didn't make the playoffs in 2015. Lampard didn't even wind up coming over for much later. And, New York City totally pivoted towards a strategy of not having those brand names. Our highest paid player last year was Maxi Morales, who, he had a big stint in Serie A and in Liga MX, but not necessarily like that brand name recognition. But you saw the improvement in the quality on the pitch, right? And I think a lot of teams are more focused on actually improving that rather than signing those brand names for attention, because you've seen the sport become more popular in the States, and obviously with the World Cup coming up in 2026, MLS teams are definitely the fan, the soccer, football, it's at an all-time high right now in the States. And it's great to see.
I'm going to ask you another question. It's not James Sands related, but
Okay.
what's the games like when you play at Yankee Stadium? Because the new Yankee Stadium, I've not been in. I've been in the old Yankee Stadium, but is it okay for football? Is the atmosphere good there? Did they get big crowds? Is there a lot of people go? Or
so, like, one of the things, like, obviously, like, I would be lying if I told you that, playing at a baseball stadium is an ideal situation. And the club has been working very hard to find, a soccer specific solution. But, you still have like this hardcore, supporter section that still comes out. But one thing that I will say, it looks worse on TV than it does in person. Especially if you're on one of the end lines, it's absolutely fine. It's a grass field, which a lot of MLS teams are playing in NFL stadiums with the artificial surface. Obviously not ideal. It's probably at the bare minimum for the FIFA regulations for a first division team. But when the fans come out to Yankee Stadium, it's very special. But I think every fan is looking forward to the end of that relationship.
do you feel you'll build a new stadium shortly then? Or is that something in the pipeline for maybe future?
Well, New York just inaugurated a new mayor on January 1st. So, there's a lot of politics involved. I'll spare a lot of the details, but one of our writers on the Outfield, Chris Campbell, has, done, a top-notch job of, covering those developments. So, it's a political football right now. Hopefully we kind of see the two leading sites right now. There's like these not abandoned, but when they built the new Yankee Stadium, they overproduced parking spots. They had later built a commuter rail station, walking distance from Yankee Stadium. And so every Yankee game, pretty much, you have like thousands of these parking spots that go unused. Right. So hopefully, ideally, I think the stadium over there, but there's also talk of doing something over where the New York Mets play, by Citi Field, by Flushing Meadow Park, which might be on the table again.
So just getting back to James then, do you feel if James does make his move to Glasgow Rangers, do you feel it will be a success?
So one of the things that I'll bring it back to Claudio Reyna, because Claudio's not with the team anymore. He took over the sporting director's job at one of our new clubs, Austin FC. But who is one of Claudio Reyna's very, very, very close friends is Giovanni von Bronckhorst, right? So I think Ranger fans can like, if the transfer happens, and I think all directions point to it actually happened, that, Giovanni von Bronckhorst probably did his due diligence. They say that Gio Reyna is named after Giovanni von Bronckhorst.
Yeah, that, yep.
And he was actually, von Bronckhorst was actually in the running for the New York City FC job before Reyna left the club as well. Right. So I have a feeling that if this is a player that he wants, then I think it's going to be a great success.
And one last thing, a couple of Rangers fans have asked me to ask you this, and William, that was on before, has asked me to ask you this as well. Everybody's asking me about Bing Bong. Now, I've seen a thing with James saying Bing Bong to a crowd of the fans, and I've seen obviously New York Knicks fans doing it as well. Is that a big thing in New York? And can you explain to some of us Rangers fans what Bing Bong means to New York City fans or to James fans?
So that's a very deep question. My wife has asked me the same thing as well, and after I went through my explanation, she still didn't know. But yeah, so I guess like you can say it is, the New York City sports meme of the moment. If you want to see where it comes from and like some true New York City culture, there is an Instagram channel, Side Talk NYCFC, that put out a video called Coney Island Ski Club, that kind of like popularized the saying, but this Bing Bong comes from like the sound that the New York City subway doors make when they're closing. I'll leave it to the philosophers or any other deep meaning.
I've seen it. Yeah,
but it like Coney Island Ski Club. If you want some true New York City culture.
I've been to New York a few times. I've seen quite a few different places and sites here, and I've seen the Bing Bong at the start of the season when the basketball started. But after a few defeats, we didn't want the Bing Bong.
Well, so New York City MLS Cup champions, so like at least like one winning team got to use it.
Team. So anyway, just like to say thank you very much for coming on today. We very much appreciate that, and hopefully we can maybe talk to you again soon. But like I say, thank you very much for coming on. It was appreciated.
My honor. Thanks for having me.